Welcome to Caribbean Theology. This is the final class. We are reviewing some very important aspect of Caribbean theology towards towards an examination which the students will sit. So this is a review of the class. One of the in terms of definitions that you will have to familiarize yourself with for an exam involve one, defining certain key terms such as theology, which is the study and contemplation of the divine and religious beliefs, often conducted within a particular faith tradition. When we talk about Caribbean theology, we're talking about the exploration and interpretation of religious concepts, beliefs, and practices within the concept of the Caribbean region's diverse cultures and histories. And when we talk about diverse cultures and histories, because it's not just African ancestry we're talking about. There's, say for example, V.S. Naipaul, his ancestral home is India, because we also have experience with indentured servitude. So people from China, from India, and of course now we are learning based on new study about many Africans, many of us who think that the Indians had died out. Many of them remained, okay? Many of them were infused with, especially some of the Maroons that escaped after the Spanish fought the British. They freed just before the British took over. They freed the slaves that they had, and many of them, we are saying, could not have been African slaves. They must have been the natives who they freed. And by the time the African came to outnumber, because over 750,000 Africans came from Africa to Jamaica and throughout the Caribbean. By the time they come to mix and mingle with the Indians, then, but of course, what we have been told is that was wiped out. But when we talk about Caribbean theology, we're exploring and interpreting concepts, religious concepts, beliefs, and practices within the context of the Caribbean region's diverse cultures that goes beyond just African ancestry and histories. When we talk about African Caribbean spirituality, it is spiritual beliefs and practices that's rooted in the African diasporic heritage found within the Caribbean region. We talk about liberation theology, the theological movement that seeks to address social, political, and economic oppression, often emphasizing the liberation of marginalized groups. When we talk about Obia, what we're talking about is an Afro-Caribbean spiritual practice involving various rituals, charms, and potions for healing, protection, and other purposes. Eurocentrism, we're talking about a perspective that prioritizes, evaluate, and synthesize information and ideas. It's a perspective that prioritizes European cultures, their history, and values as central and superior to other culture. So that's important to Caribbean, okay, and the study that we are conducting. Now, critical thinking is thinking about thinking and what was previously taught. It's the ability to analyze, to evaluate, to synthesize, to comb information and ideas objectively and logically, within an understanding that history and its interpretation is a result of the varieties of human natures and circumstances. When we talk about hermeneutics from the margin, we're talking about an interpretive approach that gives voice to the marginalized perspectives and experiences in biblical theological studies. Now, the other question that we ask is if Jamaican revivalism is more similar to A, Obia, or B, Haitian voodoo. Of course, the answer is Haitian voodoo. Now, how does Caribbean theology encourage and reclaim cultural identities? So we ask several other questions in this regard. So